So I know you want me to review this episode, and I'm sure you're well-intentioned, and I would love to accommodate you, but you see, I'm not really here. Hello, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Persistence of Vision, which is episode 8 of season 2 of Star Trek Voyager. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Voyager, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the second season episode, Persistence of Vision. So Persistence of Vision is the episode in which Janeway is really stressed out, so she goes and does her holonovel, but her holonovel turns to be even more stressful as there's the main guy is cheating, having an affair with her, and there's like talks of a ghost walking around. However, things get worse when she starts seeing characters from the holonovel out in the real world, and she starts hallucinating all sorts of things, and Kes can see these hallucinations, but things turn even worse as when Voyager tries to enter the space of an alien race called the Bothans, who Neelix reports that whenever ships go into their space, they disappear and are never seen from ever again, and when they enter the space, they all start hallucinating. One by one, they become paralyzed with hallucinations. Tom Paris sees his father, Tuvok sees his wife, Janeway sees Mark and has a hallucination. Her fiance, who's back in the Alpha Quadrant, has a hallucination about him. And and then the whole crew becomes paralyzed except for Kes and the Doctor. The Doctor, of course, is a hologram, but Kes apparently is immune to or at least can resist the hallucinations because of her telepathic abilities, and moreover, she can use her telepathic powers to fight back against the alien. When the alien tries to impersonate Neelix, she fights back against him and puts burn marks on him, and with the Doctor's help is able to enact B'Elanna's plan to deflect the aliens' telepathic powers, and so Voyager is saved, and they go to arrest the alien who's responsible, but he says that he's not really here and just disappears. So, I always talk about personal milestones for me. I already talked about a few episodes back with Voyager, although I'm still at this stage when these episodes were airing, I'm still recording episodes of DS9, but with Voyager, a few episodes back, I believe Twisted was the last one I recorded. Then I stopped recording it off of the TV because I had been doing that ever since I first started watching Star Trek in Season 5 of TNG. But for some reason I just got lazy and stopped recording it, so I was sort of less familiar with the Voyager episodes from here on out. However, this episode is a personal milestone because this is the first episode that I did not even watch when it first came out. Not only did I not record it, I didn't even watch it. Now, there will be several Voyager and a couple Deep Space Nine episodes going forward that this is the case. However, I think this is the only one that I intentionally didn't watch it. I chose not to watch this episode because the preview for the episode showed that Gothic holonovel that Janeway was doing, and I hated that. So I was under the false impression from the preview that the whole episode would be about that. So I was like, no thank you, I'm out. So I didn't watch this episode at all. until 1999. I told this story before when I visited New Zealand. Couldn't get a job, didn't have a work visa, didn't have any money, so I just sat at home. And it was before the internet was really a thing. I mean, it was there, but I didn't really have access to it all the time. And so I was bored, and so the local Blockbuster had every episode of Voyager on VHS. So I would go there and rent episodes of Voyager, and this was the ones I rented, and I was actually surprised that it was actually a really good episode, because I was expecting it to suck, but I was like, wow, I never saw this one, so I might as well watch it, and it's actually good. I was actually surprised. In fact, now I would say that this is the first good episode of season 2. Although I think Non Sequitur was okay, I think this is when season 2 gets really good. However, there will be more bad episodes after this. So I am starting to question if season 2 is as good as I remember it being. Because I had a lot of sort of poor to average episodes so far. But yeah, no, this I think would be the first really good episode of the season. Because, yeah, it ends up not being about the Holonovel. Like the Gothic Holonovel is wrong. That only is a jumping off point for the main story about characters hallucinating. And I think when I did a few years ago, I did a top 10 creepiest Star Trek episodes. So it's basically my top 10 favorite like horror Star Trek episodes. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I forgot to include this episode, which I should have. And in fact, I think this episode would be very high on the list, maybe even number 2, possibly even number 1. Is it scarier, creepier than Genesis? It's right around there. It's hard to say. But, yeah, no, I think this episode is creepy as hell. I think it can get a little bit cheesy, like towards the end, when the alien was like, I'm not even here. I'm like, that you're kind of overdoing it. Now, I'm like, that was a bit over the top. But I still found it, like, incredibly creepy. Like, the way that Janeway was hallucinating, and then Kes walks in, and, like, the hallucination, like, turns small and like goes into her like a reflection like that. it was like what the hell is going on? And then how the hallucinations start picking off the Voyager crew one by one. It did seem like a sort of impossible enemy. Now there will be more episodes of Voyager, and I think it becomes like a common thing in Voyager, where they'll meet aliens who use weird, some weird thing to try to like overcome the crew. Like, for example, in season 3, there's these aliens that were used like a Voyager crew member will disappear at the same time one of their aliens will appear on Voyager, like one by one. They don't know what's happening. Or like the aliens that invaded Voyager's dreams. I think that's actually very similar to this episode. Or the aliens who God, now I lost my train of thought. Oh, the aliens who use the science experiments, who are like cloaked, and they're like doing all these wacky science experiments that are like driving people insane and like killing them and shit. So it becomes a thing with aliens just sort of messing with the Voyager crew. But I think this is one of the better. In fact, I like most of those episodes. I actually thought they were all pretty good, so I don't mind the trope. But they're all different enough, I think. It's not like trapped in the holodeck trope or the shuttlecraft trope. But this one in particular, I would single out as creepy. It's definitely the creepiest. It has this whole episode. I would say it's definitely a horror episode, and it would be one of my favorite horror episodes of the franchise. because it does have this sort of a high intense like suspense, like what the hell is going on feel to it. I think it's definitely, even comparing it to the other ones, which I do like. I like the dream one, I like the scientist one, the one with the disappearing people is okay, but this is by far the creepiest. Is by far the one that it has the most high tension and suspense to it. Especially at the start, how I think the pacing's perfect, where it shows like Janeway just being all pissed off. Although it does feel like kind of a repeat of what they did in the episode Defiant with Kira, because they showed her being all pissed off until the Dr. Bashir is like, wait a second, you have to go relax. And they did pretty much the exact same thing here with Janeway and the Doctor. But they take it, of course, in a totally different direction, where the holonovel she actually goes to relax with is not very relaxing. And then from there, of course, she starts to hallucinate, and then the whole crew starts to hallucinate and being picked off one by one. It was really intense. I think is more intense than the dream people picking them off one by one, or the disappearing aliens picking them off one by one. This was just more like you could feel like the stakes of how fucked they are. Like they're never going to overcome this. And how do they overcome it? Kes. And I've talked about this before on my channel, that I love the episodes that deal with Kes's telepathic ability. I think this is something that they underutilized and they should have used more. They completely destroy her character in season 3, which I'll get to, unfortunately, to the point where it made total sense to write her off the show because they destroyed her character. I mean, they could have salvaged her character. That was proven in the episode The Gift, where they actually did a really good job with her. So maybe they should have kept her, but whatever. they didn't know what to do with her, and so they destroyed her character. They should have focused more on this telepathic side. And I love that she's young, so she's not really, and her species is not, hasn't really developed the telepathic abilities, unlike something like the Vulcans or the Betazoids. This is more like latent, but is actually more powerful, which is proven here in this episode because Tuvok succumbed to this telepathy, but Kes was able to overcome it. And I think it was really interesting that she was able to like focus, like when she could feel, like it's funny, like again, the progression of the story in this episode is so good, because it starts with like Janeway is starting to hallucinate, and Kes like has these chills, like ooh, like she's freaked out. It's like she's sensing what's about to happen, and of course when she actually sees the hallucination, it mirrors and goes away. But then, okay, so let me get into my nitpick of the episode though. Why does she stay in sickbay as the crew starts to succumb to this one by one? Why doesn't she go out and try to like reflect the hallucinations? In fact, at one stage Janeway does call her to the bridge, and yet when we cut to the next time we see Kes, she's still in sickbay. And I suppose you could explain that maybe the alien was making them hallucinate, and she never actually did call Kes, and Kes never received the call, or the alien blocked it or something. But even so, like, why is she just standing around in sickbay? Like, why doesn't she go help the crew? It's not until after everyone has succumbed to the alien where the doctor's like, oh, you and I are the only two left. I'm like, well, why are you just standing around here doing nothing? Why aren't you out helping people in the first place? But anyway, so this is a minor flaw, though. But once she goes out, of course, she does start to succumb to hallucinations a little bit. So it shows that she's not completely infallible, and she's still susceptible to the alien's influence. But she's able to push back and overcome it. And it seems like the alien has to sort of throw everything he has at her. He even talks about how she's a plucky little thing or whatever. Though I think that's what Q said about Amanda Rogers. But anyway, not what this guy said. But he says something along those lines. And yeah, so the alien throws everything he has to throw everything he has at Cass and put all of his concentration on her. But she's still able to, once she throws in her concentration, she's still able to overcome her. Like, I think that, or overcome him. I think that the moment where he's like making the blisters or whatever all over her, she's like screaming in pain, and the doctor's standing like saying concentrate, and then of course he goes over and shuts the doctor down. Yeah, that was super intense, but you feel her, she says focus. And by the way, I think the actress who plays Cass is really good. I'm starting to notice that. Like, I never see a bad performance from her. And when the script calls her, like, she's up for the challenge, and usually does a really good job, like in this scene, because she totally sold that moment that she was in like agonizing pain, and that she had to focus through the pain and like threw the blisters or whatever right back at him, and he started freaking out and collapsed. So yeah, I love it. I think they should have done more. They should have done more of Cass using her abilities like this. Like, this is the kind of potential that this character had that they squandered, particularly in season 3. Yeah, because it was like really intense that she was the one who could save the crew. Now, as I mentioned, I think the ending was a bit too much when they go to arrest him and sees his technology, and he's like, I'm sure you're all well intentioned, but you see, I'm not really here, and disappears. I don't know, I kind of have mixed feelings about that, because that was creepy, I will admit, but I don't know. And some people had an issue with when they asked him why he did that. He said, because I can. I actually like that. I think that sort of adds to his creepiness. And because it's true, like, it would make sense that some people do shitty things to other people just because they're fucked up, just because they can. And it kind of makes sense that he's like just a psychopath that likes to prey on people. And what I hadn't noticed before was the part where Neelix was talking about how ships that go into the Bothan space disappear and never have heard of again. So you can gather that he's basically the Bothans. He's just pretending to be this, entire race of people, but it's just this one dude with like these really intense, telepathic powers, using them to, whenever people enter his space, to just totally fuck with them and take over their ships. And his power, of course, seems to be like very strong. He's able to materialize whole ships out of nowhere. But if he's not really there, like, where is he? Like, it does seem like he should be in that space somewhere, because Neelix is saying whenever anyone entered that particular space. So it seems like that is his home region. So, like, if he's, like, why is he not there? Like, that whole ship, is he just sitting on the planet, like, projecting this shit into space, like, and doing telekinesis or teleprojection, kind of like Luke Skywalker did in Last Jedi? But, like, I don't know. To me, that's just a bit over the top. The whole I'm not really here. I don't know. It seems like they just wanted him to have a creepy exit. Yeah, but I do like the concept of him just fucking with people just because he can. So getting into some of the specifics of the episode, the aforementioned Janeway Gothic Holonovel. I actually didn't really mind it in this episode. They had that guy who was like, the dude who played the security officer in the first season of Severance. Anyway, he was falling in love with Janeway, and there was a whole... Because the thing with that Gothic novel, the first part of it did have a sort of a feeling of tension to it. Like, I stand by that I don't like it, and I think it's stupid, but I think it added like the jumping off point of transitioning from the tension that this holonovel creates to the tension of the alien forcing his hallucinations on everyone. I think works. I think because it was kind of a creepy holonovel that she was running, where the guy was trying to have an affair with her and she wasn't on board with it, and at the same time the kids are talking about how where Janeway's like, oh, she plays the piano very well, and she's like, what are you talking about? I don't play the piano. So they're kind of implying that's the ghost of her mother. And so I think it kind of makes sense that the alien like uses the creepy, eerie aspects of this holonovel to fuck with Janeway even more, to make it even more creepy and more intense, to the point where the holonovel characters are, chasing her with a knife and trying to kill her out when she's in her quarters, apparently, but she's not really in her quarters, she's in sickbay hallucinating. So, I think that actually worked in that manner, but I'm very happy that we never see this holonovel again. And I was just reading on Memory Alpha that apparently I'm not the only one who didn't like it. A lot of other people didn't like it. They said that the response from fans was very negative, so that's why they stopped showing it, and thank God. Jerry Taylor apparently had plans to resolve this storyline and show it again, but because of it was so negatively received, they decided to shelf it. But other things, there's the Doctor and the holo projecting. They're trying to do holo projectors. This is something that they sort of toyed with in season 2. We already got this mention of this in projections, but of course that was all just fake. But this is the first time that we see it in actual real life Voyager time that Kim and Torres are trying to put holo projectors throughout the ship. They kind of forgot about this, that nothing ever came of it, and of course in season 3 he would get the holographic holo emitter to allow him to go anywhere, which is better than just having holo projectors. But apparently the holo projectors were invented by the writers because they were sick of the Doctor constantly being stuck in sickbay. But apparently it took them another year before they actually did anything about it. And then they had the scene where he's tiny. Like, we already did this in the season 1 episode when he was shrinking. That time he was like stretched out, kind of like Mordok from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. His face is stretched out. This time he wasn't. He was perfectly small. But I didn't find it humorous or dumb, especially they're trying to make, oh, Kim, you totally fucked up. And Kim was like, oh, it's a small oversight. Get it? Because he's small. No, I didn't really like that at all. And at least, I've been talking about how the Janeway treats the Doctor like shit. She doesn't in this episode, so credit for that. She actually listens to him when he relieves her of duty. So I gotta talk about, this is something when I was looking at Memory Alpha, like half the page seemed to be about the whole Chakotay and Torres thing. Because a lot of people forgot that this was a thing, who saw the entire show. Like, I was watching or listening to the Delta Flyers podcast, and Robert Duncan McNeil forgot all about this. He's like, what? Why is she making out with Chakotay? And of course, as I said, I skipped this episode, so when I went to finally watch it for the first time, I'm like, what? Wait, what's going on here? Because here's the thing, it's kind of similar to the Deep Space Nine episode Fascination, which implies people have latent attractions to certain other people, which make absolutely no sense for the story. Why is Jake attracted to Kira? Why is Quark attracted to Keiko, even though they have zero screen time before that? And this is similar with them implying that there's a latent attraction between Torres and Chakotay, which will be dropped entirely later on and never, ever, ever mentioned ever again. I shouldn't say later on. I should say immediately after this episode it's dropped. It's never mentioned ever again. I kind of think that's a good thing, and I am kind of against it. I mean, the only reason why I like it is because the whole episode was really good and intense, and the whole creepiness and scariness of everything that they're doing really worked. But yeah, that's silly. And I was reading all these quotes from Robert Beltram, who says, "Oh, it proves that Torres had a thing for Chakotay," but Roxana Dawson was like, "No, she tried to come up with some crazy headcanon on why Torres actually didn't have feelings for Chakotay. It was just the alien fucking with her," which I appreciate the effort to try to correct what they did, what the writers did in this episode by implying that Torres had a attraction to Chakotay, but I'm sorry. It doesn't fit. The writers are clearly intending for Torres to have a attraction to Chakotay, and which I think is kind of dumb, and I'm glad that they left this off together. And so they're doing the Chakotay and Torres thing, and then later they put Chakotay and Tom Paris together. But they never put it with Harry Kim, which is who they should have. They have natural chemistry. Like, feed off that chemistry that they have. But anyway, sorry, I ranted about this a lot already. So I won't get into it. So this is the first time we see Admiral Paris, Tom's father, and of course it's played by a different actor. Because I don't think it's till season 6 that he appears, and he becomes a somewhat recurring character. And I think it's obvious that they wouldn't try to find the same actor that they had who just appear in this one short little scene. Instead, they get the guy who played George's immediate supervisor when he worked for the Yankees on Seinfeld. They get the actor who played what's-his-face who worked for the Yankees to play Tom Paris's father, and I think he's much better. So that makes sense, and that's another thing that might be weird for some people after seeing the whole show to come back and it's like, wait, that's not Tom Paris's father. But this is the nature of TV show production. Like, it's impractical to bring this guy back, and they probably wouldn't even if they could, because they want to recast someone who would be better suited for the reoccurring role. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other things. Tuvok sees his wife. Oh, they mention that Harry sees his girlfriend Libby, who we just saw in Non Sequitur, but we don't actually see her. So I guess they just couldn't get the actress. I don't know. Why didn't they just say his parents? Why didn't they say, oh, I see my parents? Because we see that Harry really wants to see his parents again. But I guess they wanted to do the callback to Non Sequitur, but they couldn't get the actress, or maybe it would have been too expensive just to bring her for a quick scene. Because I'm sure the budget in this episode was spent elsewhere, and they didn't really want to bother, because they can't spend too much time on everyone's hallucination. They gotta focus on a select few. Like, I don't think we ever actually saw what Chakotay was hallucinating. They did a little fake out where he left a bridge to get engineering, and we see him show up in engineering, so we think that's really him, but it's actually not. It's Torres hallucinating. He actually never made it to engineering, but we don't actually see what he was hallucinating. But I think that about covers it. So I would now like to thank everyone for supporting me on Patreon. All the Patreon supporters, thank you so very, very much. Helps me continue with the channel. And when I say this every episode, but I mean it. Like, I would not be doing these videos if it wasn't for your support. And so I'd like to give a big special thanks for Jordan Johnson and Brandon Neilhouse. Thank you all so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco Chuck Hooks, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Michelisio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, we do have a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, I admit I preferred the reboot of this episode, which is called Bliss, but this variation is still pretty good. The focused first on Janeway and the holodeck characters coming alive were telling, and I suspect the man from the fantasy going after Janeway with passionate declarations of love may have been that demagogue manipulating things even then. Oh, within the holodeck. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I mean, that's possible. I'm not saying that's not the case, but I sort of like the idea that was actually the Holonovel, and he was just feeding off of that she was subjecting herself to this, suspenseful, creepy Holonovel, and he just used it. But I don't know. You could be right. But anyway, was Kes calling in to say she would be right there in the bridge from Kes, or was it our villain deceiving them, considering that she never goes up to the bridge? Almost like Troy in Times Square, where the question is, wait, is she supposed to be somewhere or not? Or has she got there so fast? LOL. I would have liked more of a take of what individual key characters we're seeing, especially since I forgot this. Harry Kim mentions Libby probably for the last time in the entire series, and we just saw her a few episodes before, so they could have worked in a scene with that actress. Yes, the passionate scene between Torres and Chakotay was definitely interesting, and in the whole context of the series, controversial, but anything about Torres having such feelings for him is never expressed again. Then when it does become the Kes episode, that is when it really gets good, and definitely the strongest moment of the episode as she defeats the Q Light figure. However, him explaining why he did it was simply because I can was definitely disappointing. Still makes him a stronger villain with motivations than, say, the Borg Queen, but that is such a low bar. And of course, the effort to try to do holo emitters in the rest of the ship for the Doctor never mentioned again. So if anything, the reset button, self-contained driven Berman prevails yet again. Sigh. And of course, what was going on in the top floor we'll never know in that lame holographic program as it concludes here unfinished. Given all the flaws, I'll give it 8 holographic evil housekeepers with knives out of 10. Well, yeah, I mentioned earlier why it's never concluded, because people didn't like it, including me. So I didn't like it so much that I refused to watch this episode at first because they showed it in the previews. That's how much I didn't like it. So I actually think it was the right decision never to show it again after this, because apparently I wasn't alone in not liking it. Now, as far as the reboot Bliss being better, I actually prefer this episode. And Bliss is a funny thing, and I'll get to it when I get to it. But when that episode first came out, I loved it. But over the years, the more I saw it, the less I liked it. And now it's to the point where I think this is far superior. Because, I don't know, Bliss had this silly monster hunter guy, which I think he was a bit over the top and a bit silly, where this is more straight out creepy, and it deals with Kes using her telepathic abilities, which I find way more interesting. Plus, it's more creepy. Did I already say that? I need to re-emphasize. It is much more creepy. It's very horror, much better of a horror episode. But that is just my humble opinion. And yeah, I already talked about how Kes never made it to the bridge, and as you say, the in-universe excuse could be Janeway never actually called her. It was the alien fucking with her, but yeah. But why was she standing in sickbay doing nothing when she knew her telepathy? Anyway, sorry. Already been over this. Next comment is from Antarius. He says, I only vaguely remember this one and was expecting to dislike it because of the Janeway Lambda 1 program. But besides that, I enjoyed the mystery and it was unexpected and refreshing that Kes would save the ship. On TOS, it would have clearly been Kirk because of his love for the ship, or Spock because of his green blood, and on TNG, Data because of the inhuman nature, or Wesley for being super intelligent. In my opinion, Kate McGrew performed really strong in this episode, and I like that Janeway, at least at the beginning of the episode, indeed obeyed the Doctor's orders. That was unexpected in comparison to other shows. The gag about the Doctor being super small in engineering was dumb. We already had this one in the second episode. Rather weak was the explanation of why the alien doing all that because I can. So my rating is a weak 8 out of 10. So yeah, you're the second one to mention disliking the alien, saying that he's doing it all because I can. Now, I can definitely see your point of view, I will say, because that is like kind of weak, and it's like, come on, writers, could you not come up with a better reason on why he was doing this shit? But on the other hand, as I mentioned, I actually kind of like it. I think it does kind of make sense. As I said, there are some people out there who just like to fuck with people just because they feel like it. I mean, Q is kind of like that. He's not as sadistic as this guy is. And of course, more powerful. So, because Q definitely just likes to fuck with people for fun. So I think it makes sense that he would do that. Is it the most satisfying reason in the world? No, but I think it works. Now, it's a good thing you explained to me in a comment what Janeway Lambda 1 is, because I had no idea what the hell that is, but apparently that's the name of the Gothic holonovel, so there we go. As I said, glad they never did this before. I think if it was TOS, it would be Spock, clearly, who would be the one unaffected, because he was shown as like this super being who's never he's never affected by anything and always saves the ship. I guess the only exception to that is This Side of Paradise, where it's Kirk who saved the ship, but usually it's Spock. And TNG, Data. Yeah, I mean, the Wesley being super intelligent, but Data, I think, is more likely because he's the one who's always like unaffected because he's an android. Now, granted, they had the Doctor, but the Doctor at this stage is just stuck in sickbay, so he can't do anything, so he needs Kes. So again, I think this is the more interesting way to go. And Deep Space Nine, by the way, would be Odo. Although Deep Space Nine did this storyline, these kind of storylines less often. I think the only true example of that is the Dramatis Personae, where Odo was the only one not affected, but yeah. Anyway. Next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "Thank you, Jerry Taylor, for writing a good episode. I know I shit all over Voyager, which I do a lot. For some reason, Voyager does the best horror episodes, and for the rest, it's usually a horror to watch. I wish they didn't only focus on Janeway. Tuvok would have been a better choice, in my opinion. Kes is great in this episode. I absolutely loved the last scene in engineering when the alien said, 'I would love to accommodate you, but you see, I'm not really here.' So my rating is 9. Who would ever eat ugly cucumber sandwiches out of 10? Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of those cucumber sandwiches. That looks silly. Yeah, I mean, the whole, you see, I'm not really here, I'm actually less keen on that than I am about the whole I just do it because I can. I'm not really here, I don't know, it seems unnecessary. It just seems like they were trying to be like, whoa, like add like this extra element of like spookiness, but yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings about it. But I do agree, Voyager actually tends to do the best horror episodes, I think. Well, I think this is one of the best. So, next comment is from Benjamin Mead, who says, "I agree with other comments about the Kes stuff being the best bits of this episode. The tiny doctor joke was redundant, and the frustration of no explanation for the alien. But this episode should be called Transmission of Illness instead of Persistence of Vision, because Janeway picks up and touches all over that cucumber sandwich, or whatever it was, in the mess hall, and then puts it back on the tray. Gross. I don't think I like this one as much as everyone else. It's one that to me is forgettable, as every time I watch it I can't remember what the cause of Janeway's visions are and how it ends up. The first half of the episode sets it up like it's just a Janeway problem, and then the whole crew starts having visions in the second half, and it means it's a mean alien who has no reason for toying with the crew, so I always forget the second half of this episode. I think the second half is better, personally. I think that's when it gets really good, in my humble opinion. But the whole thing about Janeway, I did forget to mention Mark, because this is the first time we see him. In fact, I don't even know if they name dropped him in Caretaker. I think maybe they did, but just so slightly that I didn't even notice. Like, I wasn't aware that his name was Mark until this episode. And they will name drop him a couple more times until season 4, when they finally gets a letter from him saying, "No, I moved on." It's funny knowing that in the context of this episode, where the hallucination of him is saying, "Oh, how dare you love someone else? I'm waiting for you," which it's interesting to note that in real life that's not the case. But anyway, although we don't know when he met someone new, maybe not at this stage yet, maybe he was still in mourning at this stage, but still. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, "To me, this is the first great episode of season 2 of Voyager, and it gets better from here on out, minus the shitty episode Threshold and the fucked up bullshit Tuvix. Yes, I hate that episode, but besides those two, season 2 is a great season. To me, this is one of the scarier episodes of Star Trek, and I would say that this is probably the second scariest behind Genesis. But as an episode, I think this is better than Genesis, and I also love that this is when Kes starts to become more utilized and finally gets to use her powers, which she saved the day. That was cool. And also the various crew members becoming stunned lock when they engage with something that's either traumatizing or engaging with their holographic family members. To me, that was both cool and scary. Yes, the final scene where the bad guy gets away with it and explains himself that he just because he can was a very weak sauce, and wished it was more complex than that. And also I hated the Victorian simulation thankfully, this was the last episode with that shitty program. So yeah, I love this episode, so my rating is a 9 out of 10. You know, I'll leave my discussion for season 2 later, but after watching, I already watched the episode that's next, and now I'm starting to question if season 2 is as good as I remember. But, I don't know. Maybe I'll be turned around by season 2. But yeah, those 2 episodes you mentioned definitely do stand out as, like, terrible. 2 Vic's even worse than Threshold. I said it. It's true. But, yeah, everyone's complaining about him saying he does it because he can't. I actually didn't mind that, but that is just me. Yeah, great horror episode. Totally agree. And you bring up a good point that it's better. It's a better episode than Genesis. Even if Genesis is more scarier, creepier, I think this is the better episode, which is definitely the case. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So, my rating for Persistence of Vision out of 10, I'm going to give this a 9. I was kind of stuck between an 8 and a 9. But you know what? I think this episode was so intense, suspenseful, creepy, scary. And the pacing was perfect, like the way they slowly ramped it up with having like Janeway starting to question herself and going to Neelix and asking him about all the food he served and shit like that. Just the way they slowly ramped it up, I think it was genius. It was really well structured. So I'm going to give this a 9. It is a weak 9, to be sure. If I did points, it might be like 8.7 or something like that, or 8.6, but now I don't do that shit though, so I'll give it a 9, but a weak 9 it is. One of the best horror episodes of the franchise, I would say. So anyway, that is it for my review of Persistence of Vision. If you enjoyed this review, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of the episode. And if you'd really like to support the channel, you could do so by supporting me on Patreon. There's a link in the description below. I have different rewards for different tiers, such as a patron-only series of videos that I do exclusively for Patreon supporters where I revisit reviews that I've already done. And I got pre-releases. You can make comments. I read in my videos. All sorts of things that you can check out if you are so inclined to do so. So let's see what's coming up next on the channel. Thursday will be the start of Strange New Worlds, Season 3, which I will be covering weekly. Thursday I'll be covering the first 2 episodes that are airing that day, so I'm covering both of them, episode 1 and 2. Saturday, I'll back to Deep Space Nine to review Starship Down, and then Monday, the episode I was just alluding to, Tattoo, will be reviewing that. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Strange New Worlds and many other videos on Star Trek and other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching.